Do you want your own world? Do you want control over access? Do you want your brand on it? We can give that to you with spot-on 3D web worlds. Affordable and secure. Make it your 3D web with custom, DIY, or ready-made content. Ideal for universities, nonprofits, entrepreneurs and enterprises, and even pioneering individuals pushing the metaverse forward. Create your vision with spot-on 3D web worlds.
Hello and welcome back to GRIDwrap on this rather dark and cold Monday for us in the UK. But our guests and our audience are scattered all over the place. And I have to welcome my co-host, Tessa Harrington. Welcome, Tessa.
Hello.
And then our wonderful guest today, Jokay Wollongong, who is Jokay in RL of Joykadia Islands and of Joykadia Grid now, I believe.
Hi everyone, and thanks so much for having me. Yes, from Joykadia Grid, my home grid these days.
Home grid. Now, I mean, I did the subject matter today, Joe, as get your own grid. Basically. Subtitled, na 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 na. So, tell me something. You've got Joykadia Islands. Do you still have them in Second Life?
Yes. We still have a footprint in Second Life. We still have 4 islands in Second Life and a whole range of fantastic residents who are part of the Joykadia community. So we're not quite gone from Second Life yet, but we do spend a little bit more of our time out in OpenSim these days.
So why did you want to go to OpenSim?
It's something I've been really interested in for a long time. And when I first looked at OpenSim, of course, it wasn't particularly ripe and it was hard to get installed, and there are all sorts of reasons why it was just easier to work in Second Life. Then back in 2009 I had a few moments, shall we say, with Linden Lab, and I decided that I really seriously needed to look at what the alternatives were, and particularly for the kind of work I do where my focus is on working with educators and educational institutions. It's very hard to say to them, come and spend a huge chunk of your money on this commercial product. Yeah, sure, there are a bunch of issues with it. One of them is that, the landmarks, the kind of field of play is changing all of the time. So that's one issue. The other issue, of course, is IP and ownership and control of your content. So educators like things that they can run on their own networks or use a hosting provider if they want to and have those flexibilities. So that's one reason for wanting to be in OpenSim, and the other ones are about sharing and open source and being part of that growing community of people who are working on, creating OpenSim as something that everyone can use.
But you're still here in Second Life as well. So do you think you will swap over completely? Will you, take the foot off the Second Life grid?
It's hard to say. I think that the importance of being in Second Life is the people that we're connected to here. And, everyone knows that the educational community in Second Life is pretty epic. And we have some amazing connections to people from all over the world through Second Life. So we're still here because those community connections are important. Sometimes Second Life is still a better place to do things. Some of my particularly tertiary clients and the teachers that I work with find that just the sheer bulk of users in Second Life is important to some of their learning outcomes. So we'll be here for the time being, but I do think that as OpenSim grows and becomes more diverse and exciting, and anyone who's been out exploring a little bit will attest to the fact that it's just growing so fast at the moment, and there's all sorts of things going on, that probably our focus will shift more and more towards OpenSim.
So when you went into OpenSim, was it with your work in mind specifically, in the sense that was it a work-based platform, as say, opposed to something as specific as that?
Yeah, I mean, I think primarily it was about, creating a place for the work, but it's also about, having space to design and create. I'm a content creator as well, and I remember the first time I got onto our grid, and I had god powers and, you know, all these sims and, you know, all this great stuff that we could suddenly do that was just cost prohibitive in Second Life. So from a creativity perspective, you know, OpenSim, you know, really offers some fantastic options for artists to explore and create and share without having to have rich benefactors. A lot of artists in Second Life rely on space from others to build.
Yeah.
But also the ability to do things like pull your files back and put them on a different grid really easily, and be able to run them locally on your own machine, on your own grid. So that flexibility of content is really important for content creators as well.
Okay, one of the things, I was looking at your CV basically, or your resume, and one of the things that you say you believe is that learning should be playful, collaborative, inclusive, engaging, joyful, social, and fun.
Absolutely. So one of the things that you know, originally got me into virtual worlds was that idea that we could make learning, you know, immersive and interesting and connected to other people. And I think as someone who has worked on my fair share of boring learning management systems and educational products that maybe aren't so fun and inspiring, I can remember that sense of, wow, the things we could do for students here when I first started in Second Life, and that feeling still really persists out in OpenSim. And in fact, in the last 3 or 4 months, we've seen some, you know, really fantastic outcomes from some of the teenagers that we're working with.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're working with teenagers. Do you find that there's going to be a problem with, or do you think there's going to be a problem in Joykadia with teenagers and adults? I know is it mainly educational institutions there?
Joykadia is an edu-arts grid, so the vast majority of people that are on our grid are educators or somehow connected to education or arts. So it's a fairly sensitive, supported environment there. Joykadia is PG. And we're pretty strict about that, so no dodgy content, and you know, occasionally I have to put out language warnings and things like that. But in general, it's a very peaceful place, and people are there, you know, because it's a safe grid and they protect it. So community is very important in terms of how we manage safety, both for adults but also for young people in world. What we're doing at the moment is we're able to manage them quite closely because they're a small group and I know who they all are. And their teachers work with them, so they're fairly closely managed. Having said that, though, we have plans to create a student mentoring group in 2011, which will be about young people being part of that process and helping to make the grid decisions on how we manage things and what the rules are. And I think that's really important to you know, empowering young people to be part of managing their own safety in world and helping them to develop those skills. We will also eventually develop a kids grid. So something that we do have on the agenda for the longer term is a much more restricted environment where the much younger kids will be able to come and play. At the moment, we say to parents and teachers, if your kids are under 13, you can bring them in world, but they do need to be really heavily supervised and managed, so they've got to have someone holding their hand. Kids Grid will allow kids to have their own space, and we will run a student council there, and it will be an environment that's sort of vastly student run.
It sounds really fun, actually. It does sound as if it's focused on the students and their enjoyment and their kind of the things that are attractive for them rather than perhaps on the teachers. Tessa, I'm sure you're dying to come in about this.
Yeah, I have a 16-year-old who used to be on the teen grid, and I was just astounded at the ease of somebody getting an account on the teen grid, and the lack of moderating, because there was definitely, you know, unfortunately, you give the kids the right tools to build with, and they will build things that we're not really comfortable with them having.
Yeah, those are...
you know, there's just no way to completely wipe that out, unfortunately.
Those are real challenges. I mean, you know, kids are kids and they will explore things. And what we try to do is set up, you know, activities and structures and strategies that help them to, you know, be diverted into, you know, focusing on what they should be doing in world. But it's also about having, you know, relationships with those kids and being willing to hang out in world with them a bit. And most of the time when they meet the grid owner, they know they've got to behave. They know that, you know. Okay.
Well, did you feel like is this going to be a grid exclusively for kids, like the teen grid? I really kind of felt like that was kind of a kettle and a drum kind of thing, because, it made it so easy for people we worry about getting involved in it, and it blocked us completely out as parents. Are adults going to be welcome to travel that grid, or is that exclusively for kids?
The Kids Grid will have to have some management attached to it. One of the reasons for setting it up is that there are some schools that we would like to get involved in using that space, and they have, fairly hardcore rules about what they'll allow their students in and into. Having said that, though, one of the great things about OpenSim is the ability to use the hypergrid. So one of the things that we think we'll be able to do is actually invite the students to invite us over when they want us to come over. So that there will be that ability for adults to drop in for open days and visits and things like that, where we can manage things and make sure that it's safe. But at the same time, kids aren't missing out on that fantastic network effect of connecting to people from all over the world and, having those opportunities to create those relationships that we've all had in Second Life. And I know one of the first kids we had on the grid, his name's Sebi, and he's a gorgeous kid. And I remember one of the first times he kind of got surrounded by a bunch of teachers, and they all oohed and ahed and thought he was amazing. That there is a real lovely kind of connection and communication that goes on between residents, and that's part of safety. So we work really hard to make sure that all the kids that we know, all the kids that are coming in world regularly, and that we have a dialogue with them, so that they have people they can talk to in world if they need support, and they also know what the rules and the regulations and the those sorts of things are, so they can behave appropriately in world.
I was just going to ask you about that. You've just brought up the idea of environment and the possibility of actually taking children out of their present environment in the first world, in the real life world, as it were, and offering them something perhaps that they might need, in the sense of a comforting environment, a nurturing environment. Do you find, you've been in Second Life for quite a while, Jo, do you find that actually it changes children's lives?
Yeah, I think, we're early days with kids in world at the moment, and so we're learning as much as they are often. But just watching some of the regulars that we see drop in, I think Joykadia Grid provides them with a space to come and be creative and to be valued for that creativity, and for some kids that doesn't always happen. So I think that's a really important thing. I think there's also some really fantastic communication outcomes that happen for kids, because they're surrounded by all these adoring teachers who want to know what they're up to and they're interested and want to give them support and feedback. So often, we see kids learn to build in a nanosecond, because everybody wants to show them something, and someone gives them a script, and and it all happens. So I think there's those kinds of outcomes, but then we also see outcomes in terms of teaching and learning. We've just recently been working on a tourism and hospitality project with some students from regional Australia, and we had one kid in particular who was really struggling to finish his course, particularly with the face-to-face role-play type activities. This kid got in world and aced it. Finished everything, with really, really quickly. But what was even more exciting for this kid was that, as someone who had been quite socially disconnected from his learner group, he was actually able to recast himself as someone who was very competent and expert in what he was doing. And he became the go-to guy in the classroom that was helping everyone sort out their hair and, put your shoes on and all those lovely things. But that actually allowed that kid to develop a whole new confidence in the way that he was communicating with his classmates. And his teacher in particular commented that this was the fantastic outcome for this kid. I think that is really life-changing, when you can kind of rediscover those connections and realise you're not the dork in the corner that nobody wants to talk to.
That's right. The corner is much bigger than it was, and is round rather than a right angle.
Exactly.
And the thing is, of course, you said you're in Australia, and do you think you did it originally in order to reach out, Jo? In the UK, we're very used to Australians coming in and hanging out with us for some years, really, before moving on, or maybe going around Europe and what have you, because, and we hear this quite often, that there's a sort of isolated feeling about Australia, although I loved it. I like being isolated, but... You know,
I think that's probably part of it. I think early on in Second Life, when I first connected, it was like, wow, this amazing international network of people that I could never have, had the opportunity to meet otherwise. And for me, professionally, being in Second